difficulties.
Sorry about that, guys. Technical
Hopefully.
difficulties. In the name of the podcast, so let's go from, let's just step back a little bit. You had started into, I want to say, Battletech.
Okay, so go back. Mage Knight, then
Mage
Mech
Knight.
Warrior.
Go back to Mage Knight. So you were playing, Mage Knight.
Yeah, so it was a kind of a fantasy game with some steampunk in it. This may sound familiar to you. And played that for a couple years. WizKids came out with a Mech Warrior themed game as well, so sort of like a collectible Battletech, I guess, with pre-painted minis, that sort of stuff. I played it from the beginning to its end, pretty much. The company sponsored side anyway, and I ended up winning the world championship of that game twice. Once when I was 15, once when I was 17. Being flown to Gen Con, playing with people all over the world. It was lots of fun. Mm-hmm. Once that game went under, well, the company more or less went under, unfortunately. They still exist now, but owned by Topps. I needed another game, so I started playing 40K, which I played for a few years. But I was really looking for something competitive again that had this big championship sort of feel to it. And I picked up the Mark II Steamroller packet just when they were still in beta, really, and saw that it did not require models to be painted, which is something I sort of don't love. And yeah, from there, I was hooked. I mean, I bought Crix first. Within a year, I was playing Signar as well, and fast forward into 4 years after that, and now I play pretty much every single faction. Yeah.
All right. So the next question is, what are you taking to the Worlds this year? What faction are you bringing?
I am quite certain that it's going to be Signar again, just like last year. It's sort of my jam. It's definitely the faction I have the most experience with, especially Haley 2. Well, it was kind of a hot topic, but yeah, definitely a lot of experience with them. Second caster's still up in the air. I think if you're going to be putting Signar on the table at a world event, I don't think the first caster is really up for debate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's all about what you're going to do as your second.
Yeah, how can you mitigate your caster's issues, really?
Right, and what are the issues that you feel you deal with?
Now, at this level of play, are brand new casters like Haley 3 something that you would even think about, or do you need to have somebody that you've got a lot more experience with?
I think it's definitely in the conversation, especially when they're as good as Haley 3.
Okay.
I think you have to... Now, Signar has a very top-heavy caster loadout, I'll say. I think there are 3 or 4 of them that are just amazing. Mm-hmm. And the rest are sort of like middle to not so interesting, which contrasts with some factions, say for like trolls. But I think Haley 3 is in that conversation. She's up there. So you have I expect to see some of her for sure. She is very good. She takes a lot of practice though, and as do a lot of these new casters. Actually, they're very well designed, but they require a good amount of effort to play well, I think.
Is there an argument for saying that taking something like Haley 3 gives you some bit of advantage because maybe some of your opponents aren't ready for it, like haven't played, like they may have played 6 billion games against Haley 2. Is there an advantage there at all to taking a new caster?
There is, even against the top players. I mean, something that is relatively new will still make a difference. You might, for example, against Haley 3, you'll probably remember that she has Temporal Flux. Mm-hmm. You're likely to remember that she has Force Hammer, and you're probably going to know that she has Repudiate because it's the first real Connie B upkeep removal outside of Iris.
Yeah.
But you might forget that she also has Dominate like Haley 2. Yeah. You might forget things like that. So no, there's definitely a good argument for playing something like that, and I think it has to be part of a team strategy,
right?
Because if your player is not ironclad on how to play these new casters, it will probably cost you more than if you just went with a standard, Siege, Haley 2, or
gotcha.
Haley 1, Haley 2 sort of thing.
Or E-King, because, well...
Yep, yeah, E-King is good too.
He's the greatest caster. I'm just kidding. Other than he really is the greatest caster. So tell me a bit about what the WTC is and what it means for our game. What does it mean? Why do we need events like this? And what is the event and why do we need events like this?
So, I mean, WTC is, currently, they may change, is a 64-team event with 5 players per team. That brings it down to 6 rounds, essentially, and all these teams are, with a couple exceptions, put together from specific countries following FIFA rules. And otherwise, it's like a tournament, a 64-person tournament, except each round is going to have 5 players from one team face the other 5. They'll roll off to see who goes first in the matchup selection. Essentially, you'll have the first team, or the team that is usually forced to go first, will put up a player. The second team will put up 2 players. The first team, again, will now pick one of those 2 players as the opponent for its first drop, and then vice versa until all players are selected. This does mean that one team gets to select 3 of the 5 matchups, which is generally seen as a pretty big advantage. Mm-hmm. However, to kind of help curtail that, the WTC last year implemented a rule where the team that only picked 2 of the matchups got to pick where all 5 games happened on the tables. So each team is presented with both teams are presented with 5 tables for the games to happen. And so the team that only gets to pick 2 matchups selects where all 5 of these matches happen.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. It's way more complex than I thought it was. It's not so. it's not just the same sort of thing as our local tournament where it's the basement of a game store that may or may not have air conditioning and 6 stinky dudes. So that I'll let Semi ask the next question. But the question while he's thinking of his next one is, tell me a bit about Team Canada and how that. I mean, we started as 1 team, I want to say, grown to 2. How were those teams selected? How did you get to this point?
So we started, I mean, last year we were dead set on having 2 teams attend. Last year, so both years, there's been a committee sort of selected of prominent organizers, PGs, judges in the Canadian community that have helped pick the members. So last year there was really a drive to foster sort of inter-regional associations. So I was the only member from Ontario on my team. All 4 others were either from BC or Alberta. And the other team was led by an Albertan and had 4 people from Ontario in it. Okay. So that last year, that was sort of the goal. Whereas this year, it was a little more, okay, let's get people that are close together so they can get more practice games, get more camaraderie going. So that is what we did this year. So all 5 of us are from Ontario on this team. Or sorry, actually no, Chandler is from Quebec, as much as he'll deny it. And then the other team has, I believe, 3 members from Alberta and 2 from British Columbia.
So, Mark, when you guys are practicing for this, when you get everybody together, how do you do it? Are you guys just playing against each other? Are you doing fake WTC picks? What do you guys do to practice?
Well, we all live within about 4 hours of each other, and excluding one member within 1.5 to 2. So we've had a few game nights at my house, or game days, I should say, where all 5 of us get together with a 6th to get some practice games in, and we discuss matchups we're concerned about. We maybe test out new lists, different variations on old lists, to see what works and what doesn't. Really, we also meet at tournaments all the time, just because the GTA has a gigantic amount of players, and there's a tournament every weekend. So it's pretty rare just to go to a tournament without us, maybe 2 or 3 of us being there, at least.
It's kind of getting true of the Ottawa meta, too. I think we're at a tournament a week now, it seems like. Not quite the size of the scope.
One every 2 to 3 weeks right now.
So the next question is, I mean, typically, how many games do you get in a week, and how do you manage to get that many games in?
I'd say I probably average at about 5 or 6. A tournament's going to be 4 rounds. There's your 4 games right there. And then there's been a lot of conventions lately, which means up to 10 games in a weekend, if not more. So I mean that sort of evens out. And there's also I like to play games on Vassal at times as well, when I can't, maybe a Tuesday night or something, find a buddy again, maybe WTC teammate, thinking, hey, I want to test out this list. let's give it a shot. So there's lots of times for games like that, but I'd say probably average is 5.
I have this visual image of him with like 6 screens around him and like 5 Vassal games, just like kicking 10 people's asses all at once. It was you.
Vassal's best played with 2 screens, so it would require at least 10 or 12.
Excellent. So when you are getting ready for a game, you're there in Ireland. You're, leaving in the morning to your local game store. What do you do? What's your pre-game ritual? What do you do before you start a game?
Coffee's a must. That's got to happen. I like to usually make my lists on the ride over in the car. It's pretty rare that I'll have them pre-planned, although given the abundance of theme lists, sometimes it makes it a little easier to just pull up, I'll just play Body and Soul. I'll just play Runes of War, or, Bradigus or whatever, World War. So, but generally it's lots of last minute list building, hydration, just making sure I'm comfortable and ready to take on the first opponent without being too nervous about it.
All right, last question for
Sure.
this segment. What is the one item you always keep in your battle bag or your tournament tray or whatever you're carrying around with you? What is that one item other than Haley 2? What is the one item that is like that you always keep that you don't see everybody else have? What's that special item that you've got? What's your secret thing?
Aspirin.
Good answer.
Good answer.
I have people ask me for that all the time at tournaments, because I'm known as a guy who always has it on him. It sucks when you get a headache halfway through a tournament. It's awful, and there's just nothing better than being able to reach in the pocket, wait a couple minutes and you're good to go.
So what you're saying is, when Shane Waddy and I are up till 4 a.m. playing Beer Machine, you're the man to go to the next day during the Iron Gauntlet.
That's
Good
right.
to
It's
know.
always in the tournament bag. Always.
Good to know. All right, guys, we're going to put 5 minutes into this discussion. We got to make it pretty short, just because we're still learning how to keep under these 10-minute time limits. But we're going to talk a bit about tournaments today. We're just going to do a roundtable discussion on tournaments, and then we're going to open up questions to the audience for a couple minutes. So let's talk a bit as a group, because we have a lot of. We talk about tournaments a lot, and that's because I think we're all tournament players. Both Semi and I love going to tournaments. Maelstrom, I want to get you in on this conversation a little bit because you have not yet to go to tournaments. You are a casual player still, correct?
Right. I haven't participated in a tournament. I've been to a tournament or two.
You've announced it tournaments.
I've announced a tournament.
You've taken the Moose Machine.
Watched.
You've taken the Moose Machine bullet for us.
I have not taken the plunge yet.
So let's talk a bit as a group, because we know that there are people who don't go to tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
So why are tournaments good? We're competitive players, and our competitive playerness aside, why are tournaments good for a meta?
I think tournaments are great for a meta, mostly for game density. As Mark was saying, on a tournament weekend, he's usually going to a con or something where there's 2 days, but for even a single day tournament, you're going to get in 4, maybe 5 rounds of games, which for most people, 5 games in a week is double, treble, quadruple what they would normally get in.
Right.
So just the ability to take a single set of lists and iterate on playing them over and over again is something I don't think enough people do, and I think is really good for any group, because you're not going, I lost this game, so I'll switch casters. You are forced to take the same list and say, what did I do wrong? How can I do this right?
Mark Andre, do you have anything to add to that?
I think tournaments, are a great way to get a lot of games. I think they're a good way to socialize as well. In a sense, it may not be as casual or relaxed as like a game night, but and I think it's also a good way to see how you size up against the rest of your community, if that's what you're interested in.
And I'm going to take the other side of it from as a casual tournament player. Like, I don't go to win, and I think that that makes a huge difference. The first couple I went to, I think I did, and I always do relatively okay. It's because I cheat horribly, but I do relatively okay. but I think as a casual tournament goer, I think the social aspect is really, we talked about, you touched on it, but I think the social aspect is huge. You are now in a room of 20 to 200 people who all have exactly the same hobby as you. And there's nothing quite as bonding as that in the world. And going on a 4-hour road trip with 4 of your buddies and doing nothing but talking about how awesome E-Kane is. Super, super great. So the next, so Maelstrom can't comment on that, but let's open up with Maelstrom. What are the benefits for you as a casual, because you don't play in tournaments? What are the why bother playing at all? What are the benefits of casual play?
Oh, it's a great game, and the community. I can't speak for other places because the Ottawa meta is the only one I've ever been involved in, but the community here is fantastic. Everybody's super friendly. It's just a great way to meet people, and especially because I moved here from Nova Scotia less than a year ago. It was a great way to meet people, and I've met some really great people. And it's a fun game to play.
Perfect. So the last thing, we'll just we'll move right off this topic. I'll open this up to Marc-Andre. Because you've seen more competitive players than any of us combined. You've played against more competitive players. How do competitive players grow a meta? How do competitive players hurt a meta? And do you have advice for competitive players to help grow their meta and be better competitive players?
That's an excellent question. I think a competitive player will help grow a meta in the sense that other players will want to beat him or her. They'll want to get good enough, or they'll want to play the right list, or whatever. They'll want to take this person down a peg, for lack of a better word. Not maliciously, of course, but it's that like kind of friendly competition. And so a player that is more competitive than perhaps the average will, in theory anyway, encourage people to get better at the game, think about their games, think about their list composition, maybe a little harder. On the flip side, there can be a player who's too competitive for a meta, and I don't mean in the unsportsmanlike way, because that's a different subject, but someone who perhaps just plays a little too hard, a little too, strong of a list, to the point that it maybe doesn't get, it takes some of the fun out of it for other players. Mm-hmm. I think in a tournament setting, I think Privateer Press has clearly said that sort of anything goes, but where the competitive player needs to be a little more careful in growing a meta is on the game night, making sure that the expectations for the game are met and are obvious. So, for example, if you go to a brand new player, well, you don't want to stomp them with Haley 2 or whatever. It is not a good way to make sure that guy comes back next week.
They'll immediately go to the forums and complain. So
they'll start a thread right away.
Yeah,
that is a perhaps a necessary but not a sufficient reason. But yeah, I think you've got to be careful in those instances, because some players don't like the pressure to perform that other competitive players will bring. Sometimes people just want to relax, and they just want to play Sturgis 2 or something. They want to.
As the saying goes, do a little bit more beer and pretzels gaming.
So before we drop and we do our final segment of the day, guys, sorry to cut you a little bit short on that thought because it's great. I just want to open it up to questions from the audience. Maelstrom, do we have any questions for Marc-Andre from the audience?
We had a couple comments. Brad McLeod making some comments. We've been talking about best ways to learn, and that's to lose. Brad plays Banky. Mm-hmm. Pretty much every week, and just goes against him constantly, and loses a lot and learns a lot, and it gets to the point where sometimes you don't lose as bad and sometimes you win.
My God, I never want to play that dude.
Yeah,
he'll be the nicest guy in the universe, but he will smoke my ass so bad I'll be burned. Oh, great. Well, I think we're going to move right along